am pressing record because my first day at college exploded. It did not crack or wobble or go slightly wrong. It blew open like a window in a storm and cut me. You will understand why I breathe like this when I talk. You will see why my hands shake when I remember. I want you to picture a crowded hallway and a thin door. I want you to feel the eyes before you see them. I want you to hear laughter before you know the joke. On day 1, they opened my door and broke my world. I was not ready, and that is why I am here. Before any of that, my life looked calm and safe. My mom left sticky notes inside my suitcase with hearts. My stepdad loaded the car and gave me a wink. My little brother filmed the drive like a road movie. He asked if college felt like crossing a secret bridge. I said it felt like standing in warm sunlight alone. I had a boyfriend back home who texted me playlists. He promised late calls and weekend visits and patience. I believed in those promises the way kids do. I arrived on campus thinking hope could be a plan. The campus felt like a city built for fresh starts. Trees lined the paths like open arms waiting quietly. Banners waved with slogans about belonging and bravery. People hauled boxes, hugged, and forgot to hide joy. I wanted to belong so badly it stung sweetly. I checked my schedule twice and traced building names. The dorm loomed like a castle with thin brick shoulders. I dragged my suitcase up, ready to claim my room. I pictured a neat bed and a window with light. I pictured my first night reading until I fell asleep. My door was already cracked open like a warning. Inside, bags were piled on both beds without shame. Voices echoed from the hall like a restless tide. I cleared my throat and said hi in a whisper. No one answered, so I set my suitcase down gently. I told myself this was a mix-up, nothing serious. I would find the resident assistant, sort it out. I had class papers, ID cards, and a smile ready. I tried to act calm like the adults in movies. I was not an adult yet, not in that moment. I needed to change clothes after the long drive. My shirt clung to me and my jeans felt heavy. I closed the door quietly and turned the lock slowly. I thought I heard a laugh but ignored it fast. I grabbed a fresh top and the softest pair of shorts. I told myself it was fine, it would be fine. I was thinking of scheduling and bookstore lines and maps. I was thinking of calling my mom after I settled. I was thinking of texting my boyfriend a shy photo. Then the door flew open and the hallway shouted. Hands had propped something against the lock to jam it. The handle turned like it knew a secret about me. The door swung wide and a dozen faces rushed forward. Phones rose like little black flags hungry for capture. Someone yelled welcome to college and the others cheered. I stood frozen in my underwear with nowhere to hide. My clothes lay on the bed like abandoned tools. The hall swallowed my room and turned it into theater. I could hear the camera sounds like small mechanical giggles. I could feel my skin blaze as if under neon. The laughter grew hot and bright, and I shrank. I grabbed the top, fumbled, dropped it, and bent down. That only made the chorus louder, and my chest tightened. I said stop, but my voice sounded like paper ripping. Someone said it is just a joke. Calm down, babe. Another said, consider it your first exam in humility. The words slid over my skin like cold soap scum. In that instant, I was not a person, just content. A clip, a reel, a punchline ready to be shared. I wanted to vanish, but visibility trapped me in place. I learned that humiliation has a smell and a sound. It smells like dust and new paint and nervous sweat. It sounds like 100 tiny claps inside your ears. It feels like standing barefoot on shards you cannot see. I pulled on my shorts with hands that would not obey. I tugged my top down and stared at my floor. A girl near the door lowered her phone a little. She gave me a look I could not understand fully. Was it pity, curiosity, or just another kind of hunger? Either way, she did not step closer or step away. After what felt like hours, the tide finally receded. They left in 2s and 3s, still laughing, still filming. The door hung open as if refusing to protect me. I shut it and leaned my forehead against the wood. My breath returned in stumbles like a runner who fell. I counted to 10, then 20, then 30, shaking still. I picked up my ID from the floor with care. There were smudges on it that looked like fingerprints. My name stared back at me as if widened. I told myself I would not cry, not yet. I sat on the bed and texted my boyfriend. I wrote first day meltdown and tried to joke lightly. He sent a heart and asked what happened exactly. I typed in erased, typed in stopped. I could already hear his questions and my own doubts. Would he think I brought this on myself somehow? Would he imagine someone else's hands instead of phones? Would he pity me and then avoid me slowly? I closed the chat and opened it again and waited. The 3 dots appeared, then vanished, then nothing at all. I called my mom and hung up before it rang. I did not want that tremor in her voice tonight. She had cried in the car when we said goodbye. I had promised to call only with happy stories first. I could not give her this story, not yet, not again. Instead, I opened the campus map and stared blankly. Lines and icons shifted while my thoughts spun noisily. I needed facts, tasks, and a small list to hold. I would talk to the resident assistant about the room. I would breathe, drink water, and keep my head high. I went to the RA office with steady steps. Inside, a student with a badge looked up kindly. I explained the room mix-up and the door incident. The badge student listened and took notes with patience. They said moving day is chaotic, but we support you. They promised to check the roster and fix the overlap. They suggested I file a report about the door episode. I nodded, unsure if words could fit what happened. Embarrassment feels slippery when turned into sentences on forms. Still, I wrote it down like stitching a small wound. Back in the hallway, I noticed a rhythm developing. People's eyes slid over me and then darted away. A few whispered as if they shared a private code. Laughter bubbled up behind me when my steps quickened. I told myself it was in my head and walked. I told myself I was overreacting and kept breathing. But my phone buzzed with a notification like a sting. A tag appeared from someone I did not recognize. It said welcome and had 3 crying, laughing faces attached. I did not open it, but I felt it open me. That night, I unpacked like a person in a dream. I folded shirts and lined notebooks in careful rows. I taped a small photo of my family near the desk. It showed us at the lake on a quiet Sunday. My mom's hair was wild and my brother was grinning. My stepdad held a paper cup like a toast. I looked at that photo until my heartbeat slowed. I told the person in the photo to hold me. I told her she would survive the echoes and screens. I told her tomorrow would be a new kind of try. Sleep came in broken pieces like a string of beads. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the doorway. I kept hearing the phones lift and the laughter flare. I kept thinking of the girl with the tilted phone. I kept wondering if she felt anything besides the moment. When dawn rolled in, I was already sitting upright. The sky outside the window looked clean and untroubled. Birdsong drifted in as if the world had reset. I envied that reset and pretended to borrow it. I got dressed for orientation and tied my sneakers. Orientation was a theater of smiling, careful words. Leaders talked about respect, consent, and community standards earnestly. Slides flashed with phrases about belonging and safe spaces. I stared at those words and felt a slow burn. A girl beside me doodled stars in her margins. Another scrolled quietly and tried to hide her phone. I wondered which of them had seen me already. I wondered which of them had saved the clip. I wondered if the word community could ever hold this. I clapped when everyone clapped and waited for dismissal. Between sessions, free snacks served as a bandage offered. People clustered around tables with bright wrappers and small cups. I took an apple and pressed it into my palm. A guy in a hoodie smiled at me briefly. He asked if I had found my classes yet. I said almost, and his eyes softened for a moment. He told me to skip the second building elevator. He said it groans forever and eats 5 minutes daily. I thanked him as if returning a priceless favor. That kindness felt like water on a scorched patch. Then the messages began to arrive in a wave. A friend from high school texted a confused question. She asked if I was in a video online. My stomach dropped like a misstep on a dark stair. I wrote what video and held the phone tightly. She sent a link with silence and 3 worried hearts. I did not click it, not then, not there. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. My hands found the apple and held it harder. I whispered, not me, not me, not me. I went to the bathroom and locked a stall. My breath sounded loud in the square little room. I finally tapped the link and watched with dread. There I was, framed by a doorway like a stage. The camera shook while laughter poured from the hallway. Someone zoomed cruelly, then added a caption in neon. It said Day 1 Initiation with a grinning face. In the corner, a username flashed like a flare. I recognized it from the dorm bulletin welcome list. The video had thousands of views and growing fast. Shame is not a single emotion, it is a swarm. It crawls, buzzes, and settles where you cannot reach. It tells you to run and also to freeze. It makes your own body feel like an enemy. I pressed the phone to my thigh and stayed still. I counted tiles and made up stories about their marks. I repeated my name until it sounded like a stranger. I remembered my brother's road movie and the bridge I promised to cross with open eyes. I decided I would not drown on the first span. I reported the post through the platform's gray pathways. I wrote about non-consensual filming and targeted humiliation. I flagged the caption and the tags that mocked me. I took screenshots like collecting evidence after a storm. I saved the username and the comments and the time. I did not know if anyone would act quickly. I only knew I had to claim the timeline. I emailed the conduct office with a simple subject. I typed I need help and pressed send carefully. The rest of the day moved like heavy furniture. In lectures, the lights dimmed and my fear brightened. When professors spoke of codes and ethics, I leaned forward. When they joked about syllabi, the room laughed freely. I smiled when needed and kept my face steady. I sat near exits to breathe the hallway air. I saw myself reflected in the black screen often. I saw my shoulders square a little more each hour. I saw the version of me who learns to fight. I did not know how yet, only that I would. A quiet vow formed and warmed my chest softly. By late afternoon, I gathered small facts and bigger questions. The username matched a person who lived 2 floors up. The clip featured angles that suggested more than one camera. The comments referenced an inside joke about door lottery night. There were words like welcome committee and queen of keys. I understood that this was not random or harmless. Someone planned it. Someone unlocked my door deliberately and waited. Someone decided my body was a prop for their power. Someone turned my start into their stage for applause. I felt the vow pulse again like a steady drum. On the walk back to my dorm, the sky shifted. Clouds stacked like quiet witnesses above the brick paths. I passed a flyer about a campus concert on Friday. I passed a notice for a debate on privacy rights. I took a copy and slipped it into my notebook. A thought clicked into place like a key in metal. If they wanted an audience, they chose the wrong stage. I still did not know their names or their plan, but I knew the story was bigger than a prank. I knew the next step would begin with paying attention. At my door, I paused and listened for whispers. I opened it slowly, checked the frame, and looked inside. The room smelled like new books and lilac detergent now. I set my bag down and closed the door firmly. I sat at the desk and opened a fresh page. I wrote what I knew and what I feared gently. I wrote every detail from the handle to the caption. I wrote the time, the faces, the tilted phone. I wrote a promise to the person in the photo. I would not be content, and I would not be quiet. My boyfriend finally called while the page filled. His voice sounded familiar and far at the same time. He asked if I was okay with a pause. I told him I was working on being okay now. He asked about the link, and silence balanced between us. I said I would explain when I could breathe better. He said he believed me, and I clung to that. He asked what I needed, and I said time. We ended the call like people on uneven shores speaking. I leaned into the chair and watched the light fade. As evening settled, the dorm grew loud and bright again. Music pulsed down the hall like a restless heartbeat. Laughter rose and fell, and doors clicked in patterns. I made tea and stood by the narrow window. Outside, a group took selfies with silly hats and glitter. I traced their outlines with my eyes and felt steadier. I was not their joke anymore. Not only that, I was a person writing, collecting, and learning to look. I wrapped both hands around the warm mug and waited. Somewhere, a piece of the puzzle was waiting for me. Later, my inbox pinged with a short official reply. They acknowledged my report and scheduled a meeting tomorrow morning. They asked me to bring any screenshots and names. They said they take student safety very seriously here. I read the lines twice and exhaled into the room. Relief and fear braided together in a careful thread. If this became formal, people would take sides quickly. If this became public, rumors would multiply and mutate. I laid out my notes like cards on a table. I chose to keep going because stopping felt smaller. I scrolled the comments again and paused on something new. A user wrote, "Same crew tried this last fall. Careful." Another added, "The queen always gets a door to open." Hidden among the jokes, there were breadcrumb whispers and hints. I captured them and added them to the growing file. I circled times and usernames and small repeated phrases. Inside the noise, patterns began to flicker like distant lights. The laughter that swallowed me now started to leave echoes. Echoes I could trace back to hands and decisions. Echoes that sounded less like victory and more like clues. I almost missed the message that slid under my door. It was a paper folded twice with no signature inside. The handwriting leaned sharp, almost decisive in its strokes. It said, "Check the common room camera from yesterday afternoon." My pulse hopped and then steadied into a new rhythm. I tucked the note into my notebook and closed it. Someone else had been watching the watchers, or maybe hurt. Someone decided to tip me without stepping into the light. That meant I was not alone inside this ugly moment. That meant the path forward had more than my footprints. I did not sleep early, but I did rest. I lay on the bed and counted my breath slowly. I let each inhale collect the scattered pieces of me. I let each exhale set them down in place. Tomorrow I would ask for the footage and the names. Tomorrow I would sit across from people with authority calmly. Tomorrow I would begin to turn content back into truth. For now, I let the room hold my softer thoughts. I let the vow return, warmer, steadier, and louder inside. And I focused on the pattern that had just begun to emerge. Morning arrived and I walked to the conduct office with my notes. I kept the anonymous message folded tight in my pocket. My heart beat like small knocks on a locked door. I told myself this was not about revenge yet. I told myself this was about truth and safety. I pushed open the office door and tasted recycled air. A receptionist looked up with a practiced, careful kindness. She asked my name and offered a glass of water. I sat down and lined my screenshots like stepping stones. I said I am ready to explain what happened. The coordinator met me with a notebook and calm voice. She asked me to start where it hurt the most. I said the door, the phones, and the laughter first. I described the smell of dust and fresh paint clearly. I told her about the caption with grinning neon letters. I told her about the usernames and the whispered phrases. She nodded without interrupting, which made words keep coming. My mouth felt dry, but my story felt steady. When I finished, she asked for consent to request footage. I signed the form and watched my signature become evidence. They called the dorm office while I sat breathing quietly. They asked for common room and hallway cameras yesterday afternoon. They asked for access logs on the main entrance, too. The coordinator said patterns matter in cases like this. She said pranks often hide inside repeated small decisions. She wrote door lottery next to Queen of Keys firmly. Those words looked strange and simple on lined paper. I asked if this happened last fall to someone else. She said there were rumors, but no formal complaint filed. I felt a mix of anger and cold focus growing. On the way out, I passed a poster on consent. It said respect starts before the joke and after. I looked at the bold letters and saw my doorway. Consent does not pause in hallways or hide in captions. It does not erase because a crowd decided to laugh. It does not bend just because a tradition feels old. I walked the path to the dining hall in silence. Inside, trays clattered and coffee hissed like small storms talking. Normal noise felt like a cover I could step under. I took a seat near a window and watched faces. The guy in the hoodie from yesterday waved and approached. He asked if I had time to go over maps. His voice had that easy tilt that makes trust possible. I nodded and he sat with his backpack half open. He pulled out a campus map marked with bright circles. He showed shortcuts and places to avoid after dark. He pointed to the second building elevator like before. Then he paused, lowered his voice, and said he saw something. He had been in the common room the day before. He remembered a group laughing near the camera and whispering. He said he did not know details, just the vibe. He drew a small square on the map where they stood. He described a silver keychain that flashed like a fish. He said the person with it moved like they owned space. He said he could tell me more after his lab. I thanked him and felt that thread of steadiness return. Allies do not always arrive with trumpets, sometimes with maps. He scribbled his number in the corner without hesitation. He told me to text if I needed a witness. I folded the map and put it with my notes. Back in my room, my phone vibrated with messages. My mom asked how orientation was going with Bright Hope. I sent her a photo of my desk with books. I wrote, "Classes are intense, but I am finding my feet." She replied with a heart and a small star emoji. She said, "Call if you want a voice in your ear." My boyfriend wrote that he saw something upsetting online. He asked if we could talk before dinner his time. I told him I had meetings and would call later. In his typing dots, I felt the weight of distance. I opened my laptop and watched the posted clip again. I studied reflections, edges, and the timing of laughter. I looked past my own panic toward the doorway frame. On the right side, a sliver of a wrist appeared. A silver glint caught the light just before the swing. I froze the frame and compared it to my memory. The hoodie guy's fish-like flash sounded suddenly precise and useful. The caption's font matched two other posts on the account. Those posts tagged parties with the same inside phrases repeatedly. The pattern tightened like a net pulling toward a shore. I searched the campus hashtag and found more soft evidence. A photo of a ring of keys at a mixer. A joke about entry fees being a smile and timing. A boomerang of a group holding doors like a dance. In comments, the same two usernames nodded at each other. They used the phrase welcome committee with a crown emoji. They used here we go again with a winking face. My stomach twisted, but my resolve anchored deeper inside. I copied links and pasted them into a growing document. I added times, places, and phrases like a patient cartographer. The conduct office emailed a calendar hold for afternoon review. They wrote that initial footage would be ready to screen. They asked again for any witness who felt comfortable sharing. I texted the hoodie guy and asked if he could come. He replied with a yes and a thumbs up quickly. I closed my eyes and pictured the common room camera view. I pictured moving shapes, the silver flash, and the laughter. I pictured a door propped open by a well-practiced trick. I pictured names to assign to the laughing silhouettes soon. The image did not scare me as much anymore. Before the meeting, I sat in a quiet study space. I opened a notebook and wrote to the lens directly. You are not just watching a story, you are part. You are hearing a body say I am not content. You are hearing a voice refuse to vanish into a clip. If you have ever laughed at someone without consent, listen. If you have ever felt like content, not human, breathe. I wrote those lines like chalk marks on a path. I imagined someone younger watching this later and learning steadiness. I felt less alone as the minutes turned with purpose. At the conduct office, the coordinator welcomed me into a room. The hoodie guy sat beside me with a quiet nod. A tech pulled up the footage on a large screen. The common room appeared with couches, a vending machine, and light. Timestamps lined the bottom like steady marching numbers. We watched the afternoon unfold in small, ordinary motions. Then a group of 4 entered with practiced casual energy. One checked a phone and pointed toward the hallway entrance. Another laughed and lifted a keychain that flashed under fluorescence. The camera caught the reflection in the vending machine glass. They spread out like a team that had done this often. One drifted to the corner near the camera's blind slice. Another leaned on the wall and pretended to scroll lazily. The one with keys held them up and gestured counting. On the hallway feed, a second angle showed their faces briefly. Not clear yet, but enough to catch a pattern of hair. Enough to notice a distinctive bracelet with tiny metal letters. The coordinator froze the frame and zoomed as far allowed. The letters suggested initials that matched a public club officer. My breath hitched, but my focus sharpened into something cleaner. We watched as one of them walked down the corridor. They paused near my door and checked the handle once. They pulled something from a pocket and wedged it carefully. Then they stepped back, glanced at their phone, and grinned. On the main feed, the others counted down with fingers. The timestamps aligned with the moment my door opened. My body remembered the heat while my mind gathered facts. The hoodie guy whispered there. See the flash again? Look, the keychain swung, and the light caught it like a signal. The coordinator saved stills and noted exact frames for records. She asked if I recognized anyone from orientation events. I thought of the welcome table with club sign-up sheets. I pictured a smiling leader handing out pens and flyers. I remembered the crown emoji used with the phrase queen. I did not say the name yet. I stored it. The coordinator said this is strong early evidence of planning. She said the next step was to identify individuals formally. She said she would request card swipe data and interviews. She said I could choose supportive measures during the process. I chose a quiet floor transfer and a no-contact directive. Leaving the office, I felt taller, though my legs trembled. The hoodie guy walked with me across the green lawn. He told me his sister had something similar in high school. He said no one believed her because it was a tradition. He said he wished someone had listened with the same focus. I thanked him for showing up without needing attention or credit. I said his map felt like a lighthouse the first night. He laughed and said lighthouses are just tall, stubborn lanterns. He said he could walk me to the new floor later. I said yes and tucked that offer into my pocket. Back in my room, I packed books and a sweater. I folded the lake photo carefully into a notebook sleeve. I touched the edges of the frame and whispered patience. I told the girl in the picture we were moving up. The hall sounded different today. Less like applause and more air. As I taped a small box, my boyfriend called again. He asked what the office said and if I felt safer. He told me his roommate heard the clip from someone else. He asked if I had done anything to provoke it. The question landed like a pebble in a glass bowl. I asked what provoke means when a door is unlocked. I asked what consent looks like under a crowd's laughter. He apologized quickly and said he did not mean blame. He said he was scared and far and hated both. He promised to drive up next weekend if I wanted it. I said maybe, because my life was changing every hour. I said I needed someone who believed me without asterisk. We sat in the warm static of the call for breaths. He said he loved me, and I said I heard. We said talk soon, and the line softened into silence. Late afternoon, the RA helped me move to a quieter floor. The room was smaller but felt like a sheltering shell. I set my notebooks on the desk and tested the lock. The click sounded true, and the handle resisted like loyalty. I texted my mom a photo of the new view. I wrote I am okay, and getting support step by step. She wrote proud of you and call me after dinner. I made a list on a sticky note and numbered tasks. Retrieve class materials, attend lectures, meet coordinator tomorrow, stay hydrated, document. Lists make chaos line up like soldiers who follow orders. As evening came, I went to a student forum on privacy, the room filled with voices that sounded brave and curious. A speaker asked who owns a moment once it is filmed. Another asked how tradition becomes a shield for cruelty quietly. I stood up and said a few simple sentences. I said consent is not a party trick or a dare. I said jokes cannot ask for payment from someone's dignity. I did not mention my clip, but I did not hide. People nodded with faces that looked awake from inside. A girl approached after and said she liked my clarity. She wore a plain sweatshirt and a careful half smile. She looked like the tilted phone girl from the doorway. We stood near the exit as students streamed by talking. She said some people in her group were getting careless. She said they believed the campus would keep shrugging forever. She said she could not be part of it anymore now. She pressed a sticky note into my hand and stepped back. On it was a name I already suspected and a detail: office hours, Mondays, student government suite, and another small-time window. I tucked it into my notebook and thanked her softly. On my new floor, the night air felt cooler and steady. I set my alarm and checked the door twice with intention. I laid out tomorrow's clothes in my folder of evidence. I texted the hoodie guy that the move went fine. He sent a thumbs up and a photo of the shortcut. He wrote small steps make big roads, and I smiled. I curled under the thin blanket and let my mind arrange. The common room footage, the keys, the bracelet, the names. The tradition whispers, the crown emoji, the queen of keys. A picture formed that looked less like haze and more map. Sleep did not come easily, but it came with a lesson. My breathing matched the hum of the building slowly and evenly. I thought of everyone who ever felt turned into content. I thought of how power hides in jokes and nicknames. I thought of how a door becomes a weapon with planning. I promised the version of me in the doorway a future. I promised the version of me at the desk some rest. I promised the voice in this recording patience and honesty always. I promised the next morning would not scare me into silence. And I rehearsed the questions I would ask at office hours. When I woke, the sun slid across the wall like certainty. The hallway smelled like detergent and the faintest coffee drift. I brushed my teeth and looked myself in the mirror. I saw the person I am when no one is watching. I saw someone who knows humiliation is not the end. I saw someone who can turn a scattered story into shape. I filled my backpack with notes, water, and a quiet steadiness. I locked the door and felt the click travel up my spine. I walked toward the student government suite with my shoulders open. Somewhere ahead, the hidden puppeteers were about to lose shadows. The hallway leading to the student government suite smelled of polish and ambition. My sneakers tapped on the tiled floor like a countdown drum. I held my folder close to my chest, not because it was heavy, but because it was proof that I was not just a girl in a video. I was a witness, a collector of threads, ready to weave them into a net. My palms sweated, but my steps did not falter. I had practiced this moment in my head 100 times last night, and now I was walking straight into it. When I entered, the suite looked like a set from a recruitment poster. Banners leaned against the walls, smiling faces framed on glossy paper, and tables stacked with flyers. Laptops glowed on the counters as students typed emails that sounded important. And there, behind a desk with a clipboard and a bright grin, was the person whose name had been scribbled on the sticky note. Their bracelet gleamed like a quiet confession under the fluorescent light. I stood still for a second, watching how naturally power dressed itself as friendliness. I walked closer, and the smile widened as if rehearsed. They asked if I needed help finding an event. I nodded, steadying my voice, and said I was curious about how campus traditions worked here. The question seemed harmless, but their eyes narrowed for just a second before smoothing into charm again. They launched into a practice speech about unity, bonding, and harmless initiation rituals. I listened, not interrupting, not giving away the storm brewing under my calm surface. Every sentence felt like a thread that would tie them tighter when the time came. As they spoke, I noticed how other students glanced their way with a mixture of admiration and caution. Respect and fear often share the same chair, and here it was clear. The so-called leader commanded the room with gestures, but behind those gestures, I saw the shadow of the door, the laughter, and the keychain flash. My chest tightened, but I kept my expression neutral. When they mentioned how everyone should feel welcome, I almost laughed out loud at the cruelty of that word in their mouth. Welcome to them meant exposure and control. I left the suite without confrontation, but not without confirmation. The sticky note, the footage, the bracelet, all of it aligned. The Queen of Keys was no longer a rumor. They had a face, a name, and an office. I texted the hoodie guy that I had seen enough to know. He replied with 2 words, "Careful now." I tucked the phone away and walked across the lawn, the wind tugging at my jacket as if to remind me that the game was still dangerous. Knowing the puppeteer meant I was closer to the strings, but also closer to the trap. Back in my new room, I laid everything on the desk. The screenshots, the notes, the sticky paper with the name, and my fresh observations. I wrote in bold letters, "This is not an accident." The words looked like a scar on the page, but also like armor. I realized I was not just defending myself anymore. I was defending whoever came next. This wasn't just about me. It was about everyone they would humiliate after me if no one stopped them. That thought gave me more energy than coffee ever could. Later that day, I met with the coordinator again. She had a folder thicker than mine, filled with access logs and official records. She told me the swipe data matched the group from the footage. She said their names quietly, letting me hear them one by one like bells in the dark. I recognized 2 from my classes, one from the hallway smirks, and of course, the Queen of Keys. My stomach churned, but my head nodded. The pieces fit too well to ignore now. I was not paranoid, I was targeted. The hoodie guy showed up after his lab and added his witness statement. He described the silver flash, the countdown gestures, and the laughter that started before the door even opened. His words were sharp but steady, like stones laid on a path. The coordinator thanked him and said the investigation was now moving forward formally. That phrase felt heavy. Formally meant meetings, hearings, and consequences. Formally meant their masks might start to crack. Formally meant I was no longer fighting shadows. I was standing against names with status and followers. On my walk back, the air felt thick, like whispers following me. I checked my phone and saw new comments under the clip. Someone wrote that the Queen always wins. Another wrote that it's tradition, so she should chill. My chest burned, but I noticed something else. A few comments defended me. Strangers said humiliation isn't funny, that boundaries matter, that the so-called tradition sounded toxic. The tide was small, but it was shifting. The Queen of Keys had power, yes, but not everyone was laughing anymore. Some were starting to see the cruelty behind the curtain. That night, I received another folded note under my door. My pulse jumped when I unfolded it. This one had fewer words, but more weight. It said, Friday night. Auditorium. Everyone will be there. Perfect stage. My hands shook as I held it, but I understood what it meant. The trap I was building was not just about paperwork and evidence anymore. It was about timing, about the right moment when exposure would cut both ways. They humiliated me in front of everyone. My chance would come the same way, only sharper. I didn't know who was leaving the notes, but I started to trust them. They wanted the Queen exposed as much as I did. Whether it was another victim, a regretful accomplice, or someone with their own reasons, I could not tell yet. What I knew was this. Friday night was the stage and the curtain was already rising. I stayed awake late, planning, writing, imagining the silence after secrets are revealed. I rehearsed how their smiles would falter when the crowd finally turned. The next morning, I saw the Queen walking across the quad with her entourage. She laughed, tossing her hair back, the bracelet glinting like a medal of arrogance. Students parted to let her pass, some out of admiration, some out of fear. I watched from a bench, blending into the background, but inside I was memorizing every detail. Every gesture, every smirk, every careless word would soon matter. The Queen looked untouchable, but untouchable only lasts until the light shifts, and I was learning how to shift the light. At lunch, whispers grew louder. People speculated about the investigation without knowing details. Some said expulsion, others said a slap on the wrist. I chewed my food slowly, listening but not speaking. I realized rumors could do part of the work for me. The Queen thrived on control, on being the one who pulled the strings. But now whispers were cutting those strings, little by little. Power leaks out quietly before it collapses loudly. I could almost feel her grip loosening, even if she didn't know it yet. I spent the afternoon in the library, stacking my evidence into a presentation that no one had asked for yet. Screenshots arranged by date, video stills with highlighted details, witness statements typed and signed. My words written as captions under each piece. Planned, deliberate, cruel. I imagined projecting it on a large screen, the same way they had projected me onto feeds and timelines. This time, though, I would not be the one stripped down. They would. Their secrets, their lies, their fake charm, all displayed without filter or edit. When I left the library, the sky was bruised with sunset, the campus glowing in gold. I walked back with steady strides, the vow inside me now humming louder than fear. I wasn't done suffering, not yet. But I was no longer just suffering. I was shaping something. Every step toward Friday night felt like walking up a stage staircase, each rung heavier but clearer. The Queen of Keys thought she held the spotlight, but soon the lights would turn. And when they did, I would not be the girl in the doorway anymore. I would be the one opening the door. The dorm was loud when I returned, but this time the noise didn't swallow me. It felt distant, like echoes from another life. I sat at my desk, folded the second note carefully, and placed it on top of my growing pile. 2 notes, 1 plan, 1 stage. Friday was coming, and with it, a new story. A story not of humiliation, but of revelation. And somewhere deep inside, the quiet fire burned hotter. waiting for its moment to ignite into something unstoppable. Friday drew closer with a rhythm I could feel in my bones. Each morning I woke with my stomach knotted tighter. Each night I lay awake rehearsing words that I hadn't yet decided how to deliver. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about rewriting the script they had written for me. They wanted me to be the joke, the weak link, the easy target. But I had a folder full of truths now, and truths can cut deeper than any prank. I began the day before the event with a checklist written in dark ink. Screenshots organized in folders, witness statements printed and signed, video clips trimmed to the exact second where the keys flashed in the reflection. I practiced transitions, the way my voice would sound, the way silence would follow. The more I rehearsed, the more I realized this wasn't just an act of retaliation. It was a performance of survival, one that would change how people saw me and them forever. The hoodie guy stopped by my room that afternoon with a bag of chips and his laptop. He leaned against my desk and asked if I was ready. I said readiness wasn't the right word, but necessity was. He nodded, crunching chips slowly, and told me he would be there in the audience. He said sometimes it takes just one voice to flip the room. His calmness steadied me more than any checklist. He reminded me I wasn't walking into the auditorium alone. Later, I walked across campus to see the stage where everything would unfold. The auditorium doors stood heavy, polished, and indifferent. Inside, rows of chairs stretched wide, and the stage lights blinked like restless eyes. I stood at the back, imagining it filled with faces, some cheering, some mocking, some waiting. I pictured the Queen standing at the front, confident and untouchable. And then I pictured her expression when the truth unraveled in front of all of them. The image was enough to make my breath slow and my spine straighten. On my way back, I noticed the Queen herself walking with two of her closest allies. They were laughing, tossing comments about how Friday would be unforgettable. My pulse jumped, but I forced myself to walk past them with steady steps. Her bracelet flashed again, a taunt, a reminder of that day in the doorway. I clenched my fists but kept moving. Anger was fuel, but strategy was the fire. Friday would be unforgettable, yes, but not in the way she thought. That evening, I received a third folded note under my door. It was short, almost like a whisper. They're planning a stunt for Friday, too. Be ready to flip it. My hands trembled as I read it. Whoever was helping me knew more than I did. And that scared me almost as much as it comforted me. But it also made sense. The Queen would not give up her stage willingly. She would try to humiliate someone again, maybe even me, to tighten her grip. But this time, I would not be the one exposed. I stayed up that night preparing for their counterattack. I rehearsed scenarios. What if they tried to play a clip of me again? What if they mocked me on stage? What if they turned the crowd against me? For each possibility, I built a response. Screenshots, videos, names, and times, all ready to spill into the open air. I wanted them unprepared, the same way I had been. I wanted their laughter to collapse under the weight of their own secrets. The morning of Friday arrived gray and restless. I dressed carefully, nothing flashy, nothing weak. A steady outfit. One that would not distract but would not disappear. My phone buzzed with messages from my mom, my boyfriend, and a few classmates I barely knew. Some were simple good lucks, others just quiet emojis. Even from afar, I felt the current shifting. People were watching now, waiting. My humiliation had spread, but so had the expectation of what would happen next. As the afternoon bled into evening, the campus buzzed with energy. Students spilled into the auditorium in groups, carrying drinks, laughing, shouting. I slipped into the back row first, blending into the shadows. The Queen was already at the front, her entourage clustered around her, their confidence loud and careless. She wore that same bracelet, her symbol, her crown. I watched her like a hunter watching prey, not with hate, but with precision. The trap was already closing, even if she didn't feel it yet. When the event began, the lights dimmed and the room roared. Music blasted, announcements echoed, and laughter filled every corner. The Queen walked on stage like it was built for her alone. She grabbed the mic, grinning, and began her speech about unity, tradition, and fun. My chest tightened, but I stayed silent, waiting. Her words dripped with charm, each sentence pulling the crowd closer. But underneath the applause, I could hear the faint crack of arrogance, the belief that nothing could touch her. And then, as predicted, she pulled her stunt. She called someone from the audience, teased them about being new, hinted at another welcome tradition. The crowd chuckled nervously, waiting for what would come. My throat burned, but I stood up. My hands shook, but my voice did not. I said loudly enough for the room to hush. We've all seen what tradition looks like through your lens. Now let's look at it through mine. Gasps echoed as I walked to the front, folder in hand. The Queen froze for just a moment, her smile faltering before she forced it back. I connected my laptop to the projector and clicked the first slide. Screenshots filled the screen, usernames, captions, laughter written in neon fonts. I explained each piece calmly, my voice carrying stronger with each sentence. The crowd leaned forward, silence growing heavier. I could feel the Queen's mask cracking under the lights. I showed the footage, the silver keys flashing, the countdown, the door propped open. I named the Queen and her allies, matching faces to evidence. Whispers turned into shouts, laughter turned into gasps. The same crowd that had laughed at me in the hallway was now watching her unravel. Her allies shifted uncomfortably, their confidence dissolving. The Queen tried to interrupt, tried to laugh it off, but the projector light cut through her words. I ended with a still frame, the Queen's face caught in the reflection of the vending machine, holding the keys. I said, "This is not a tradition. This is cruelty. This is who you put on your posters." The room erupted, not with laughter, but with outrage. Some shouted, some recorded, some just stared. The Queen stood frozen, her bracelet suddenly nothing more than a chain around her wrist. And as I stepped back from the mic, I knew the trap had worked. The same stage they used to mock me had become their downfall. The fire inside me didn't roar or scream. It burned steady, bright, and unshakable. The crowd was no longer laughing at me. They were staring at her, at them, at the truth they could no longer deny. The night was not over yet, but the game had shifted. And I could feel the weight of what came next pressing closer, waiting for the final step. The auditorium was no longer a celebration hall. It had turned into a courtroom lit by stage lights, a place where every whisper carried the weight of judgment. The Queen of Keys stood frozen at the front, her entourage shrinking away from her as if her power had suddenly become contagious in the worst way. I could see her mouth moving, trying to stitch together words, but the noise of the crowd swallowed her excuses. For the first time, she was the one under the lens, and the silence of her allies told the story better than I ever could. I closed my laptop slowly, letting the final frame linger on the projector screen. Her reflection with the keys glared down on her like a mirror she could not escape. I felt the room vibrating, half with outrage, half with shock. The same people who once laughed at my humiliation were now recording hers. Phones lifted, not to laugh at me this time, but to capture the Queen's fall. The irony was sharp and clean, like glass breaking into neat shards. She finally found her voice, trying to laugh it off. She said it was a misunderstanding, a harmless prank, a tradition meant to bond students together. But her words fell flat. The evidence I had just laid bare was too heavy to dismiss with a giggle. Someone in the back shouted, "Bonding doesn't mean breaking people." Another yelled, "You crossed a line." The tide had turned and it was merciless. She had built her throne on the crowd's approval, and now that same crowd was tearing it away piece by piece. Her entourage began to scatter. One of them slipped quietly out the side door. Another stood frozen, pale as chalk. The Queen reached for them, but none looked back. Power doesn't fade slowly, it collapses, and I was watching hers collapse in real time. My heart was pounding, but I stood straighter, letting the silence that followed carry the truth. For the first time since that horrible day in the dorm, I felt taller than her, freer than her, stronger than her. The coordinator from the conduct office stepped forward then, her presence steady as stone. She announced that formal action would follow, that the individuals involved would be held accountable. The Queen tried to argue, her voice high and desperate, but no one listened. Her laughter, once so loud, had become nothing more than a cracked echo against the auditorium walls. I watched her bracelet dangle uselessly at her wrist, no longer a crown, but a chain that betrayed her. Students began to murmur, not about me, but about her. The spotlight had shifted completely. Some shook their heads, some whispered disbelief, others recorded in silence. And I realized something powerful. My humiliation was no longer the story. My courage was. The narrative had changed, and it was mine now. I hadn't just defended myself. I had flipped the script for everyone who might come after me. When I stepped down from the stage, the hoodie guy caught my eye from the audience. He raised a fist quietly, not for attention, but just for me. My chest tightened with gratitude. For once, I didn't feel like prey walking through the crowd. I felt like someone who had chosen not to disappear, and the weight of that choice settled in me like a new kind of strength. Outside, the night air was cool, sharp, alive. Students spilled into the courtyard, buzzing with energy, retelling what they had just witnessed. Some came up to me, offering quiet words of support, pats on the shoulder, nods of respect. I didn't need their validation, but it felt different from before. Not pity, not mockery, acknowledgement. Recognition. It was as if I had been rewritten in their eyes, not as a victim, but as someone who refused to stay one. Later, in my room, I sat at my desk and unfolded all 3 notes. They were still unsigned, still mysterious, but they had guided me here. Whoever had slipped them under my door had believed in me when I was barely holding myself together. Maybe I'd find out one day who it was, maybe not. But I knew they existed, and that mattered. I wasn't alone in the shadows after all. My phone buzzed with messages. My mom, my boyfriend, classmates I barely knew. My mom wrote that she had never been prouder. My boyfriend said he had watched a stream and couldn't believe my strength. I smiled faintly at the words, but I knew strength wasn't something that just appeared. It was built piece by piece in the cracks of humiliation and the fire of survival. As midnight approached, I leaned back in my chair and looked at the photo taped near my desk. The lake, the Sunday smiles, the small paper cup. I whispered to that version of me that she had made it through, that the girl in the doorway was not broken, not content, not silent, that she had walked into the fire and come out with something brighter than revenge, dignity. The queen's crown had shattered, her laughter silenced. But my voice had not, and in that silence I heard something new, a future that belonged to me, one I had taken back with my own hands. And as I turned off the light, I knew this was not the end of my story. It was the beginning of the one I chose to write. In the end, what started as humiliation became the spark that pushed me to fight back and reclaim my story. I walked into college as a victim of their so-called tradition, but I refused to let that moment define me. By exposing the truth, I turned their stage into mine and showed that strength can rise even from the deepest shame. If you've ever felt silenced, remember, you can choose to rewrite your narrative too. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this story. Drop a comment below with the word voice so I know you made it here. And don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you never miss what comes next.